now Leslie Marshall, syndicated radio talk show host and a Fox News contributor, and Chris Plante, who is host of The Chris Plante Show. And it is that same type of criticism that we heard from Brit Hume that had George Will this past weekend calling him a reluctant president. That's where I want to start. Whether you think we should go into Syria now or not, where is our commander-in-chief to come out there and explain it? It's an Islamist civil war that the United States is about to get into. It wasn't always this way, but it is now. So going in now is controversial. Where is our president, Chris, to explain and justify to the American people who don't get to go into the Situation Room why he's decided to do it?
Yeah, that was one of the more absurd responses. I played that audio, the back and forth with Charlie Rose and President Obama this morning on my radio show at great length. And, you know, this was an opportunity for the president to explain his policy. Charlie Rose asked some pretty reasonable, if softball, questions of the president, and he chose to give answers like, well, if you were in the Situation Room like I am, you know, you wouldn't be asking questions like that. He punted, he obfuscated. It was almost bizarre the way he didn't explain the policy. And I heard on another news network this morning from one of their crack reporters who's traveling with the White House that the White House was excited to announce that they had explained to the Russians and to Putin that their plan was not to get rid of the Assad regime, but just Bashar Assad himself and leave the regime in place, apparently, which is as incoherent as anything I've ever heard. I mean, it's berserk. And to say that this is not a change in policy to go from not arming the rebels, whoever they may be, to arming the rebels is laughable on the face of it. I mean, the whole exercise is completely incoherent at this point. And you know, he said he's being called upon to explain the policy. He had that opportunity, and he chose not to, or he doesn't have a policy that he can explain at this
Leslie,
point.
if we had decided to do this 9 months ago, and even with more force nine months ago, 12 months ago, it wouldn't, I think, have been as controversial because the factions, the rebel forces over there were not as infiltrated, according to the reports, by Al-Qaeda and these others as they are today. I mean, we were seeing kids being tortured and murdered, and now the death toll is up to 93,000+. But the fact that we waited has led to, in part, the changing of these opposition forces. And now a lot of Americans, 70%, are a lot more reluctant about, wow, do we really want to be in the middle of this? So where is the commander-in-chief to explain to us the risks and how he calculated them and why he thinks we should do it now?
Well, first of all, the president was very clear. His line in the sand were chemical weapons, WMDs. And because of history, and not picking on any former president in particular, this president, especially after being so critical of his predecessor with regard to Iraq and WMDs, wanted to make sure absolutely, without question, that they had them, they were being used, sarin gas and other chemical weapons, and where these arsenals were specifically. I think one of the reasons the president isn't telling us what he's going to do is because what I have heard from military people in Washington, et cetera, is this is far more complicated than we understand. Here are some examples. Russia has a fleet on Syria's Mediterranean coast. We have allies in Turkey and Jordan. If you blow up a chemical arsenal, what happens to the chemicals that go through the air to innocent men, women, and children that are in Syria? If we arm the rebels with military weapons, lethal weapons, do we establish no-fly zones? Syria has a huge capability to defend itself in the air. And additionally, they're also looking at launching missiles from ships.
But why can't we have that discussion?
That is not a discussion. I think that
what we've had so far is Ben Rhodes.
To our enemy.
What we've had so far is Ben Rhodes. With all due respect to Ben Rhodes, Deputy National Security Advisor, he's not the commander-in-chief. He also wasn't in on all the Situation Room meetings, talking directly with the military leaders, Chris. And wouldn't we agree on the left and the right that before we go into an Islamist civil war, which is what they say it is now, at least present day, we need to understand, we'd like to hear from the commander-in-chief what the considerations were.
Well, you know, this red line talk is just more haplessness and more effectlessness. Yes, we'd like to hear from the commander-in-chief. You can declare a red line, and the red line is crossed, and then you pretend to take some sort of action, and we don't know what it is. And you know, as the Deputy National Security Advisor said, well, we don't itemize. We can't itemize what we're going to give to them. The president was offered an opportunity by Charlie Rose last night to talk about what types of weapons would be going in. We're not going to arm them, presumably, Leslie, with non-lethal weapons. I'm assuming we're not sending Nerf guns or something. But yes, the situation is complicated. It always is. It always has been. Yes, there are chemical weapons there, unquestionably. Isn't that kind of interesting under Barack Obama? Yes, it's a sectarian war between Sunni and Shiite and Alawites, and there are allies and there are other forces behind the curtain like Iran and Hezbollah, their proxy army, and Putin is in there up to his ears, and you know, at least he knows what his policy is.
But Chris, what my point is, we need the commander-in-chief to explain to us how he weighed those considerations. And I realize, Leslie, and I realize that his credibility was on the line because he did say red line chemical weapons. But the truth is, little children have been getting shot in the face in Syria in front of their parents months ago. And that was not a red line for us. All right, so we drew it where we drew it. But there was a lot of criticism about why was the torture of children not the red line? Why was it chemical weapons use? And months and months and months went on, and al-Qaeda kept joining the forces, and now we don't know who the rebels are. I mean, reports of cannibalism of the dead bodies and so on has people like, you know, Vladimir Putin saying, you know what, I'm not so hip on your idea to stop supporting the Assad regime because I don't like your side either. And the question is, where is our leader? I'll give you the last word.
I have to tell you that I don't think that the president is absent. In the art of war, the element of surprise is the first piece in the path to victory.
Oh,
I think what they're looking at, and I agree, Megyn, as a mom, and anytime I see kids being hurt, there's a problem. But right now, think about it. You're commander-in-chief. Are you going to help to arm al-Qaeda to fight Hezbollah, which is what it comes down to, and that's what the headline will read. And when we look at history, isn't that what we did with Osama bin Laden in Afghanistan? Will we be creating another enemy or a worse regime to take over in Syria?
Yeah, I mean, that's why you got 70% of Americans who today are against this. Panel, thank you both so much.
Sure.
Thank you.